I did.
Yeah, I was able
Okay.
to.
Okay. That is good. Did you pick up anything that you might have that you felt you missed in class?
That what?
Did you were able to pick up anything that you might have missed in class?
Yeah.
Sure, I did. I was able to prepare a comprehensive note, so it was highly engaging, and I really enjoyed watching the recording.
All right. So today we'll be looking at planning your business analysis activity. There's this famous quote or axiom that we've
Sorry,
always,
sorry to interrupt
yeah,
you. Can I ask a
yeah,
little question? I just
please go
have
ahead.
okay. So based on what we did last week,
Yeah,
where we talked about the core concept model, yeah.
yeah,
So there's change, need, solution, and then stakeholders, value, and context.
yeah.
So I don't understand the change and need parts. Does change come
Okay.
first or need come first? I was a bit confused on which one comes first because it seems like the need has to be present before the change. But in the list you gave us, the change come first. I was a bit confused with that part.
Okay, thanks for that question. So, for the fact that I gave it to people in that order doesn't denote that this must come first and this will come second.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, it's just like when they say,
Okay.
what are the characteristics of living things? You say movement, reproduction. It doesn't mean that movement will come before reproduction. It's just a list that you're giving. All right.
Okay. So
Or
anyone
when they
can come.
say,
Okay.
yeah, or when they say what are the states in Nigeria, states and capital in Nigeria, and say Abia,
Mm,
Umuahia. Doesn't mean that Abia is the very first state you see whenever you enter Nigeria. All right.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that question.
All right.
Yeah. Any other?
None from my side.
Thanks. So, can you also my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So today we'll be looking at planning your business analysis activity, and we all know that back in the days, especially when I was in secondary school, I may not know about you, secondary and primary school, there's this adage in America that they say he who fails to plan plans to fail, right? And that's kind of shows the importance of planning before you do anything. If, as you are, Michelle, you want to travel to London or US or Netherlands or Canada, and your trip is going to be in the next 3 months' time, you won't tell me that you just be gallivanting and living life until a day to your trip. You now start planning what to carry, what you're going to buy, where in Canada you're going to land, the kind of apartment you rent, where you will stay before you get apartment, what airline are you going to book. You're not going to do that, right? You would have started planning ahead of time, isn't it? Same goes
Yes.
with you, Ahmad. If um if tomorrow you want to travel for a friend's wedding, right, and you are going to be the best man for the friend, maybe a long time childhood friend who has not married, and all of a sudden calls you and said, I want to marry you and I want you to be my best man, please don't say no. I say, oh, come on, I'll be your best man, or I'll be there with you, I'll support you, right?
Yeah.
And the wedding is in 2 months' time. You won't tell me that a day to the wedding is when you start planning on what to wear, which what shoe would you buy, start asking where is the wedding? Is the wedding in Dubai or Nigeria or Abu Dhabi? Where is the wedding? No, you would have started planning ahead of time. And
Sure.
what I'm trying to say is this: people plan, but they might end up planning at the wrong time. So what they used to tell us in school, that he who fails to plan plans to fail, might not completely be the actual thing. But he who fails to plan at the right time might likely fail in whatever thing is he or she is doing. So planning needs to happen at a particular time before, at a particular time within an initiative. And as a business analyst, it's important for us to plan. And when we need to plan is when the project is kicking off, when the project is starting, when we understand, when we be able to understood who the stakeholders are. And whenever a project is about to start, there's what we call project initiation meeting, or they call it project kickoff meeting. Project kickoff or project initiation is a meeting or a session or a workshop where key stakeholders that will be involved in that project meet to discuss project objectives, the project goals, the project milestone, the tentative project plan, project expectations, stakeholders from different business domains or organizations that will be involved in that project. Now, immediately after that project initiation meeting, as a business analyst, you are supposed to go and plan. What most business analysts do is after initiation meeting, they start going ahead to elicit or gather requirements, and they don't plan. And they realize that at the end of the day, they might end up not giving a quality work for that particular project. So after every project initiation meeting, the next thing you have to do as a business analyst is to plan your activities for that particular project, and then look for understand ways to monitor, right? To evaluate yourself during the course of that particular project. So today we'll be looking at planning your business analysis activity. If you go to Babok V3, you will see this topic as planning and monitoring business analysis. Planning and monitoring business analysis. That's what you see the topic as. So that's what you see the topic when you go to Babok V3. So you can go to Babok V3 to get deeper, more details on planning and monitoring, right? Which is basically textbook. Textbook give us a lot more details, but I'm going to talk about it from the practical sense, what you do on a real work basis. So today we'll be looking at planning your business analysis approach. Planning your stakeholder engagement, how you engage your stakeholder is very important, because as a BA, you have frequent, continuous, constant, and consistent engagement with your stakeholders. You'll be talking with them, you'll be meeting with them, you'll be satisfying their needs and all of that. So how do you engage your stakeholders? You need to plan. And then you also need to plan governance about your business analysis work. Governance in terms of who has a decision-making authority over the piece of work that you do. Example, you prepare a BRD. Who has the authority to approve your BRD? Who has the authority to review your BRD? You need to be able to understand all of this before the start of the project. You write a user story. Who has the authority to approve or to review your user story, right? Where do you store your work, and who should you give the privilege to assess your work as a business analyst? So we're going to touch base on all of this as we go into the topic today. So starting with the very first one, planning business analysis activities, which basically involves the planning and monitoring of business analysis activity by identifying the process or processes of how a business analyst determines which activity will be needed to complete the business analysis effort. And that is what business analysis, planning and monitoring, or planning business analysis activity speaks to. It's all about us trying to identify, trying to understand the process of how a BA, right, would determine which activity will I need in this project, and how would they be completed, when will they be completed. That is what planning business analysis activity entails. And that's because there are several activities we do as business analysts, but they are common activities, right? There are several activities we do, but they are common, popular ones we do for every project. For every project you're working on, you must elicit requirements, which is gather requirements, understand the need. You must do that. For every project you are working on, you must communicate your requirements. And how you communicate your requirements differs from stakeholder to stakeholder, from project to project, right? So, and for every requirement you are doing, sorry, for every initiative or project you are doing, you must be able to engage stakeholders. You must be able to translate your requirements into understandable technical specifications that stakeholders will use to implement the change, right? To achieve the change. So let's go straight, take a look at planning your business analysis approach, because that's the very first thing you do. You need to know, what approach would I take as a business analyst in this project? Just like every other project that we have out there, every project have its own project approach or project process or project framework. And the two most common project management approaches we have are waterfall and agile. So is either the project is a waterfall project or is an agile project, right? Sorry, someone's mic is on. Can you try to help mute, please? I'm getting feedback. All right, thank you. So is either the project is going to be run through waterfall or delivered through waterfall, or it's going to be delivered through agile. Now, these are the two project management approach, and these are the things that are agreed upon or discussed in the project initiation meeting or in the project kickoff meeting, whereby we'll make a decision and say, we are going to use agile delivery for this project, or we are going to use waterfall delivery for this project. So in business analysis, the very first thing we need to do when we are trying to plan our activities is to ask ourselves or plan which business analysis approach should we use. And there are basically two types of business analysis approach that we have. Number one is the predictive, and number two is the adaptive. Now, just as we have project management approach of waterfall and agile, also we have predictive and adaptive for business analysis. And as common sense would have its way, when it is predictive, it tends towards to waterfall. So predictive approaches have affinity to waterfall project management approach, while adaptive business analysis approach has affinity or tends towards the agile approach in project management. So when you find yourself in a project initiation meeting and stakeholders are agreeing that they are going to be using waterfall as a delivery approach for the project, automatically as a business analyst, you should start understanding or start making up your mind to say that, oh, since the project is going to be a waterfall project, it means my activities as a BA will be carried out using predictive approach. Also, if they tell you that this project is an agile project, or we are going to do agile in this project, then you have it at the back of your mind that as a BA, my approach to this project will be adaptive. And that is because adaptive suits agile environment, while predictive suits waterfall environment. So let's take a look at the things, how we basically communicate, how we time our work, how detailed our work should be if we are in a predictive or adaptive approach. But let's take a look at a better example of what predictive approach is. So predictive approach focuses on minimizing upfront uncertainty and ensuring that the solution is defined before implementation begins in order to maximize control and minimize risks. And that is why predictive favors waterfall. Waterfall is all about maximizing control. That is why under waterfall, there's a section that we solely focus on controlling the project. We set up project control measures on how we ensure we control the project and minimize or reduce risks. And that is why predictive approach is hell-bent on ensuring that every form of risks or uncertainty that we might encounter in the future are reduced to the barest minimum. And then we have the ability to control the project processes, the project initiative, the project tasks, the project activities ahead of time. Predictive is often preferred in a situation where requirements can effectively be defined ahead of the implementation, and the risk of an incorrect implementation is unacceptably high, or when engaging stakeholders presents a significant challenge. What do I mean by this? So we want to, Uptrust wants to build an e-learning solution for Michelle Global Enterprise. And Michelle Global Enterprise Michelle organization. Michelle organization happens to be a non-for-profit organization that educates the girl child on their rights, on how to, make the best use of their teenage years and all of that. So that is what Michelle organization does. And Uptrust wants to build an e-learning so that Michelle organization will not need staff and members of Michelle organization will not need to start traveling into different places and spending a lot of money to teach and train these teenage girls. Rather, from their office, they can set up classes and training, online training and classes with these teenage girls in specified communities, and these teenage girls can go to a location within their community to participate in a class online, or from the comfort of their phone or from their laptop, participate in the classes online. So we want to build this e-learning for Michelle organization. And Michelle organization have budgeted $10,000 for this project, and they've told us that they don't want to spend anything more or anything less. And they want this project delivered as early as 3 months' time. That is when they want this project to be delivered. Now, for Uptrust, if we choose to use a waterfall approach for this project, it's because we want to ensure that everything we need to do for Michelle organization, we are able to understand them before we even start building the solution. So we want to understand everything we need to do for Michelle organization from the very beginning before we even start. So we don't want to have any form of surprises whereby 3 months into the project, or 2 months into the project rather, Michelle organization will now come up and say, oh, there's something else we want you people to do. But people still need to deliver the project in 3 months. There's something else we need to do. So because of that, we use waterfall. We use predictive approach in business analysis because we want to be able to gather all of the requirements that are needed for that particular solution. So we gather all the requirements at the beginning of the project before the software developers, or before we go into the implementation of that particular project. And that is what predictive analysis helps us to do. Predictive analysis helps to, it's often prepared in situations whereby requirements can be effectively defined ahead of implementation. So before we go ahead to implement, we ensure that we have defined all the requirements, and we ensure that there's no incorrect implementation because we define all the requirements and we get buy-in, we get sign off on all requirements that are possible. Whereas in adaptive approach, we basically focus on rapid delivery of business value in short iterations in return for acceptance or acceptable level of higher degree of uncertainty regarding the overall delivery of the solution. What this means is that in an adaptive approach, we are ready to take risks. We are ready to allow uncertainties. We are ready to be flexible, just like we have in Agile. We are not concerned about defining all the requirements or gathering all the requirements before we start. Rather, we can gather the requirements of a particular piece of the solution start the development or the implementation of that solution. And then while we are building, we are gathering more requirements and building, gathering more requirements and building, gathering more requirements and building. That is what we do in adaptive, right? Unlike predictive, whereby we have to gather all the requirements before we start implementation. In adaptive, we can start by gathering a piece of the requirements that are needed for a particular portion or piece of the solution. Once we be able to gather that, then we build. While the team is building, we gather requirements or define the requirements for the next piece that will be built. And before the team is done with, before the team completes what they are building, we have the requirements for the next thing they will build is available. Before they complete, the requirement for the next one is available. And in that way, changes could be easily managed. Risks is accepted. If you have a risk of changing what we are doing, we can easily introduce those changes as easy and as quick and as fast as possible without having a risk of missing or losing the project. So adaptive approach tends to be preferred when taking an exploratory approach to finding the best solution or for incremental improvement of an existing solution. If you find yourself working in a startup, startups basically use Agile, exclusively Agile. And in such environment as a business analyst, you're going to be using adaptive approach in executing and in delivering your tasks as a business analyst. So let's take a look at things that will help us to determine if we should use adaptive or predictive approach. Number one is, things that will help us determine which approach would work best. So number one is level of formality and the level of detail required. Now, if in the project we are required to be very formal in our documentation, like when I say very formal, very formal in our documentation, there are different documentations we deliver or we produce as a business analyst in a project. We are going to learn that when we look at, I believe that should be next week, Saturday, when we look at attributes, next 2 weeks here, when we look at attributes of requirements and documentation format. You see the different documentation formats that we ought to produce as business analysts. So if we are required to be very formal and very detailed in our documentation format, like the level of formality and detail is very high, then we are going to adopt a predictive approach. And in formal documentations, we have formal documentations like BRD, FRD, SRS. Why do we call them formal documentation? They're basically formal documentation because this documentation requires stakeholders to sign off on them. They require stakeholders to approve them before we can go ahead to work. So predictive approach call for formal documentations such as FRD, BRD, SRS. Information that is captured in predictive approach must be captured using standardized templates. So if you are writing your FRD or BRD in predictive approach, you must ensure that you are using standardized templates. And when I say standardized, it could be that it's a template that the organization currently uses or a template that your clients want you people to use to write your BRD or FRD for them. Whereas in adaptive approach, it basically calls for interaction between teams, feedback loop and feedback mechanism between teams, and rarely produces formal documentation. You rarely see a formal documentation in an adaptive approach. What you're going to be seeing more of are less formal, or should I say informal documentations like user stories. They are less formal. They are not as formal as BRD and FRD. And sometimes in an adaptive approach as well, you could have a BRD, but you will not have an FRD. You just use your user stories to make up for your FRD, right? So in terms of level of formality, if you are required to produce documents, like let's say when you go for project initiation meeting, and they're telling you that as a business analyst, your sole duty will be to produce a BRD document and an FRD document, automatically you know that, okay, this is going to be a predictive approach for me as a BA. But if you go to the project initiation meeting and you hear things like user stories, acceptance criteria, then you know it's going to be an adaptive approach for you as a business analyst. Another one is activity breakdown, how we break down our activities. In predictive approach, we first need to, when we are breaking down activities in predictive approach, the first thing we do is to identify activities that are required to complete each deliverable. And then we break each deliverable into separate tasks. So we have activities, tasks, and deliverables. So the activity cascades down into deliverables, right? So we perform an activity because we want to complete our deliverable or achieve our deliverables. If, for instance, your deliverable is BRD, you need to, they tell you that, okay, you need to send out a BRD document. You need to approve a BRD document. What are the activities you need to carry out? The activity you need to carry out is requirement elicitation and stakeholder engagement. These are the activities you need to carry out. Now, what are the tasks you need to carry out in your elicitation? You might choose to use one elicitation technique or two elicitation techniques. You might decide and say, okay, I want to do both interview and benchmarking during my requirement elicitation. So I want to elicit requirement by interviewing stakeholders and by doing a benchmarking research to get more understanding and detail about features and components of that solution that you are to write a documentation about. So in predictive, we work our way by first identifying the activities we need to carry out. And for each activities, we tie it to a deliverable. So what are the activities we need to carry out for each deliverable? And then by the time we identify the activities for each deliverables, then we can now say for each of these activity, what are the tasks I need to perform in each of these activity? So in that way, you'll be able to successfully break down your tasks or break down your activities in a predictive manner. But if it is an adaptive manner, what we do is to first divide the work into iterations. Some call it sprints, some call it cycles. Iterations in the sense that we want to build, okay, let me give you an instance now. So let me use predictive and adaptive in terms of activities breakdown. Now, if you are doing adaptive in terms of activity breakdown, if I get you a cow, let's say I get a cow for Ahmad to consume, and I say, Ahmad, I need you to eat this cow. It's a full cow, a very big cow, and I say, Ahmad, I want you to eat this cow. I bring it to you as Ilea or as Christmas gift or as your birthday presents, right? This is a cow. I have my butchers that will help you to cook, kill the cow, and cook it for you to your own taste. Now, if Ahmad is to eat this cow, or if to eat an elephant or a goat, whichever delicacy he prefers, if you are to do an adaptive approach, what we are going to do is that Ahmad would first decide we should divide the cow into different segments. So we have the legs, we have the head, we have the tummy, we have the intestines that is going to use for pepper soup and all of those things. So you divide all of those things into segments, right? These are into components. So components of the cow. We have the head, the back, the legs, the tail, everything. He divides them and he keeps all those things in different pots, right? So in a very big pot or a bowl, I say this is the head, this is the tummy, this is the intestine, this is the tail, this is the legs, and what have you, right? Now, you can consider all these different parts of the cow or different parts of the goat as iteration, right? You can consider them as iteration. Now, Ahmad will now say to eat the head of the cow, right? The goal is, the deliverable now is, we want to eat the head of the cow or cow head. We want to eat the cow head, right? That is the deliverable. Since we've understood what the deliverable is, then what we will now do is to now say, what should we do for us to eat this cow head? So what we need to do is to ensure we say, let us roast the cow head or slice it further, right? Disintegrate the head further, or roast it, or grill the head, or whatever they want to do, right? So we identify what we want to do. So we must say, let's prepare the cow head, right? So preparation before cooking, right? So preparation, what are the things we'll do to prepare the cow head? We'll wash the cow head, we'll put it on fire so that it will be dry of blood and every other thing. Then we now cook. What are the things we do before cooking? We slice, we butcher the head and all of those things. I'm just trying to give an analogy that to explain what iteration means. So we want to build an e-voting solution, or we want to build an e-learning solution. Let me stick with e-learning that I mentioned earlier. So for e-learning solution, we have the in-class training module where you can take the classes. We have the login page or sign up page where users can sign up or log in so that they can have access to the e-learning portal. We have the admin console where admin can manage users, admin can configure things from the system backend. So we have all these different components of the system. In adaptive, what we do is we pick we understand that there are different components that make up the system. Then we put these components in different iterations. So we say in this iteration or in this period of work, so iterations could be for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 4 weeks. It's a period of work we want to deliver something of value. So say in this iteration, we want to build the sign up and login component or sign up and login pages of this e-learning solution, right? As a BA, what we will do is that for that iteration, we'll ask ourselves, what are the deliverables for this iteration of sign up and login? The deliverable for us is to write user stories, right? Now, what are the activities that I need to do before I can write my user story? Number one activity will be for me to elicit requirements. Number 2 activity will be for me to define requirements. Number 3 activity will be for me to communicate requirements, right? Now, what activity should I carry out to elicit requirement? That's okay. I could do a research. I could do an interview to elicit requirements. What activities do I need to do to define requirements? Activity I need to do to define my user stories or requirements will be for me to the tasks I'll need to do to define requirements will be for me to launch my Jira board, write my user stories and acceptance criteria, writing Jira acceptance criteria and user stories in my Jira board. And then the third activity, which is to communicate requirements. What tasks will I do for me to be to communicate my requirements? I could hold a workshop with stakeholders to have user story refinement so that every stakeholders can understand what the requirements, what the user story is all about, and then have a sprint session or sprint planning session with the team. So you've been able to identify what needs to be done in that iteration in terms of deliverables. Then you identify the activities needed to complete that deliverables, and then the tasks needed to complete the activities. Once you're able to do that, then you also do it for the next iteration. The next iteration might involve us to build out the in-class training or in-training module of that e-learning solution. And we identify, since we've identified the deliverable as user story, we now go ahead and identify what activities and tasks we need to work on. So in adaptive approach, in terms of activity breakdown, we go from iteration to deliverables, deliverables to activities, activities to tasks. But in predictive approach, we go from deliverables to activities and then activities to tasks. There is no iteration in predictive approaches. Okay. So the next one is timing consideration. That is the time required for us to carry out our work in either of these approaches. For predictive approach, tasks are done at a specific time. You don't do requirement elicitation midway into the project when you are doing a predictive approach. But in adaptive approach, you can do requirement elicitation midway into the project. So in adaptive approach, tasks are done iteratively. So you can elicit requirements in the first iteration. You also elicit requirements in the second iteration. You elicit requirements in the third iteration. You elicit requirements in the fourth iteration. As many iterations you have, you keep on eliciting requirements, documenting requirements, and all of that. But in predictive approach, there's no iteration. So you only elicit requirements at the beginning before stakeholders will start implementing the solution. Another one is in terms of identifying the complexity of risks required. In terms of predictive approach, the size of the change, the number of areas affected by the system, and the geographic and cultural considerations are some of the things that we put in consideration when deciding if it is going to be a predictive or adaptive approach. If it is an unknown initiative, right, or a risky initiative, we use adaptive approach. But if it is an initiative that we are clear on what we need to do from the get-go, we use predictive approach. If the initiative will require interfacing with complex multiple systems, we use adaptive approach. But if it will require us interfacing with maybe one or two system maximum, we use predictive approach. If it is an initiative whereby we have stakeholders in the same geographic locations as us, we can use adaptive approach. But if it is a situation whereby stakeholders are in different geographic location and they are rarely available, we can now use a predictive approach for that. Now, there are some risk factors that affect the approach we use in business analysis. And number one, it could be the experience level as a BA. Your understanding of the domain. So if, for instance, you don't understand the domain, you're coming from a law background like Michelle, and you want to deliver a solution as a BA for the first time for a fintech industry, you might not really have as much experience as required for a fintech or financial services domain, right? So your level of your level of experience in that domain might affect or determine or be a risk factor to your business analysis approach. That might make you to use an adaptive approach because it's a new frontier for you, right? Also, your competence level. If you are not competent or if you are not experienced as a BA, that might be a risk factor to selecting the right business analysis approach and also knowing which approach to use in that project. Another risk factor is stakeholders. Stakeholders is a very huge risk. In every initiative or project you do yourself, just know that stakeholders are one of the biggest risks you have in that project. They're very huge risks. Number one, the level of experience of stakeholders will affect the approach you're going to use. So let's say people are using predictive approach, waterfall delivery model for that project. And the person that is supposed to provide you with requirements for that particular initiative don't even know much about the business. You realize that the requirements you're going to document would not encompass everything about the solution. And you might end up giving the implementation team or the development team an incomplete requirement to work with, which might end up affecting the project along the way. Another one could be attitudes of stakeholders. Some people might be receptive. Some people might be antagonistic to you as a business analyst. Some people might even want to reject your work as a business analyst. So you need to be able to understand all of these things that they kind of represent a risk. Let me give an instance. So recently at work, I needed a member of our financial crime team to share some documentations with me as regards to financial crime and compliance for the business. So no, not that. I sent out a product paper. Yeah, I sent out a product paper. I needed them to review and give a feedback. So I sent this product paper on the 18th of April last month. 18th of April last month. And since then, she hadn't responded to me up until just Monday this week. And on Monday, when she responded, she sent a document that was, as in she sent the wrong document to me. So I've been doing several follow-up and follow-up and follow-up and follow-up. But because her attitude to my request is very poor, that has been a risk factor to me closing out my deliverable. So you need to understand that sometimes, or should I say most times, the biggest risks you have as a business analyst are stakeholders that you're working with. And knowing how to manage these stakeholders is very, very important. Knowing how to work with them is very, very important. And also having at the back of your mind that these stakeholders pose a risk to your work is also important, so that you won't get frustrated along the way. Another risk factor is the time allocated to your work as a business analyst. So the time that that has been allocated to your work might just be 1 week. And the truth is, the stakeholders are used to this. They'll feel like the business analysis work should be the simplest work that within a day you should get it done. So my colleague and I were discussing earlier this week, I think on Monday before he traveled to the UK. So our general manager had a call with me and my other colleagues, and he was telling us that we have a new initiative, a new project they want us to do, and they want us to come up with some documentations in less than 2 weeks. So when they mentioned that, I did not want to argue or try to make a point in that meeting. I just said, no problem, we'll get back to you, sir. So after telling that I'll get back to you, after the whole conversation with the GM, my colleague and I, we had to sit down, we started discussing, and we had to set internal controls within the team and say, for every new initiative that they bring to us, before they will expect anything from us, it will take 2 months, because we need to do proper analysis. We need to do proper risk factoring. We need to do proper understanding of whatever integration or whatever the project is all about. So we've been able to set 2 months maximum, or 1 month, 2 weeks, which is 6 weeks, for us to be able to turn in anything as such as user stories or discovery work for every initiative that they bring our way. So sometimes the allocation of time to your business analysis work could affect the approach you will take as a business analyst. And then another time, it could be that the approach has been rubber stamped by the business or by the organization. So if organizations say, we are using waterfall approach for these projects, it means you have to use predictive approach. If they say we are using agile model for this project, you must use an adaptive approach. You can't use predictive approach. So sometimes pre-selected framework, methodology, or tools by the organization could be a major risk for you to selecting your business analysis approach. I don't know if you have any question on the approach for business analysis work. Do you have any questions?
No, no question.
None at
Okay,
my
how
hand
about-
too.
Sorry?
None from my hand too.
Okay. All right. So let's go to planning your stakeholder engagements, right? Planning your stakeholder engagement, how you engage your stakeholders, right? And remember, I told you guys that stakeholders form the majority of the risks that you're going to experience in the course of the initiative. So the aim of planning an approach for establishing and maintaining effective working relationship with stakeholders is what stakeholder engagement talks about. How can I maintain effective working relationship with my stakeholders? How can I work well with my stakeholders? And being a business analyst makes you a people person. What I mean by people person means you kind of try to understand people, what they want and how they want it. Let me give you guys an example rather. So in my former place of work, I always had a business manager. Was it business? No, chief operating officer. I had to report to them, the COO. So when reporting this, the COO. When reporting to the COO, then what she normally do is that if you need her attention, like if you send her a mail or send her a message on Microsoft Teams or WhatsApp, she might not even respond to you, or you might get the response in 3 days' time. But if you need her to get something done or move an obstacle for you, all you have to do is just to put a call across to her. So you might be sending her mail and doing reminders, and you won't get anything from her. But by the time you put a call across to her, she will take your call and you table your request to her. She'll respond ASAP and tell you, okay, I'm going to do this, and she will do it immediately. So that is the way she always wanted us to communicate and relate with her. So I got used to relating to my top management that way. If I need anything from them, I put a call across to them straight up and then make my request. They do it, I move ahead instead of just doing reminders on mail. So as time went on, she resigned and a new person came to take over from her. So we recruited a new person and the person became a general manager in the business to take over operational and business work, which I was also supposed to report to her. So when this new person came up, every single time I need something from her, I will try to call her. And whenever I call her, she will drop my call. She won't take it. I will keep calling her, she will drop my call. I will keep calling her, she will drop my call. Even if I send her a mail, she doesn't respond as fast as I want her to respond. And it becomes so frustrating. So one day, we were in a meeting, a general meeting in the office. And then when we finished the meeting, I told her, please, can she stay behind? I would like to share something with her. She said, okay, yeah, go ahead, Genesis. So I met her and I told her that I'm not really comfortable working with her, that she's frustrating me. She was like, oh, why do I say so? I told her that, first of all, whenever I want you to do something for me, you don't do it on time. And when I try to call you, you don't take my calls. So she now laughed and told me that basically she's not doing it to me. That is the way she loves to work. That she does things faster when you send her a message on WhatsApp. So if you send her a mail, if her response time, sorry, when you send her a mail, her response time could be 3 hours before she responds to you. If you put a call across to her, she will not even respond. She's not going to allow the call to ring. She's going to drop the call straight up. But when you send a message to her on WhatsApp, in less than 30 minutes, she'll respond to you on that. And she gave me the reason because she's always in several management meetings. And in those meetings, she prefers to concentrate. So when she's in those meetings, she's not checking her mails. And if calls come through, she doesn't want to pick those calls to be distracted. But when you send her a chat on WhatsApp, she can pick up her phone while in that meeting and respond to your chat. So that is why she prefers to have you send her a chat. So in that way, I was able to understand her way of working, her personality, that she's the type of person that whatever the thing is, if you send a chat across to her, in less than 30 minutes, you get a response from her. So if you are being blocked or there's an obstacle from you completing your task or you need clarification, just send her a chat or a voice note. She'll respond to you ASAP. So understanding how to engage your stakeholders, how to work with them is very important. It's pivotal to the success of you delivering your or having successes in your initiative. So let's look at how to plan stakeholder engagement. Number one is for you to perform an analysis of your stakeholder. You're a business analyst, so you need to do an analysis of your stakeholders. And in doing or performing analysis of your stakeholders, number one, you need to identify the different roles of stakeholders that are involved in that project. Remember that at the beginning of this class today, I mentioned that for every project, this is what we call project kickoff or project initiation meeting. And it's in that project kickoff meeting that stakeholders will introduce themselves, who they are, what they'll be doing, what their expectations are in the project. And you can write down the list or the names of stakeholders and their roles. So identify stakeholder roles. Who are the stakeholders? Who are my stakeholders and what are their roles? Okay, Ahmad Sani is a project manager. Michelle is the project sponsor. Genesis is a client. Sheung is the software developer. Deborah is the finance officer. Identify all your stakeholders and also their various roles. The next will be for you to identify the attitude of each of your stakeholders. Now, you might not identify that attitude at that initiation meeting, but as you go along in the project, you can pick up the attitudes of stakeholders. Some stakeholders are very enthusiastic about a project, right? Whereas some stakeholders are lethargic. They're just there. They're not excited about the project. Some stakeholders are passionate about the project. Some stakeholders want the project to be delivered like yesterday. Whereas some other stakeholders, if you deliver the project next year, they don't care. A good example is in my place of work. So I have a stakeholder that every time we want to go live, he will bring up a new requirement that that is going to delay us 2 months or 3 months again. Whereas I have my general manager who would put a call across to me today and say, Genesis, I need you to do this because we want to go live. I want us to go live today. So you need to understand the attitudes of stakeholders to a project. How does this one have a positive attitude to the project? Does this other one have a negative attitude? This will help you to know how to manage these stakeholders and also how to manage their expectations. Then you need to also know what their decision-making authorities are. So what is the decision-making authority of your stakeholder? So Michelle is the project sponsor, right? What is her attitude to the project? Well, since she's the one sponsoring the project, she will most likely want the project to be delivered on time and within budget, right? And what is her decision-making authority? That means she has like the final decision. She can decide to say the project stops today or the project continues today. Let me give you guys another example based on experience I've had in my work. So there was a project that we were working on in my former place of work during the COVID-19 pandemic. So in 2020, then there was a lockdown imposed in Lagos, right? And Lagos is a city or a state in Nigeria whereby a majority of the population in Lagos depend on daily income. What do I mean by daily income? Daily income in the sense that they get their income, unlike most of us that our income are monthly, right? Most of them get their income on a daily basis. Example, vulcanizers, roadside vulcanizers, mechanics, they get their income on a daily basis. Bus drivers, they get their income on a daily basis. Market women, they get their income on a daily basis. So these people make up the large proportion or population of Lagos. Now, as a result of the long lockdown that was imposed in Nigeria, in Lagos as well, it means those people that depend on daily income, automatically their source of income has been cut short, right? It means they won't have that daily income coming up again. And the funny thing about this lockdown is that The federal government will come on a Sunday evening and then make an announcement to declare a lockdown to be effective the following morning. So they don't even have, it means if they don't even, if they plan to go to market to sell what they bought on Saturday, they won't be able to sell it. They won't be able to make money to sell it. They won't be able to make money from it again. Those goods would most likely perish in the store or in the house. If they plan to go to a client's place, a customer's place to fix their car so they can get maybe 5,000 naira for that day, or maybe they plan to fix about 5 cars for their customers in that week, and that 5 cars is supposed to result to 50,000 naira for them. That means automatically they'll stay with that 50,000 naira for that week. And this lockdown was going on for months, right? And as a result of this lockdown, there was several agitation, right? We started hearing of 1 million boys in Lagos, guys going, terrorizing people and all of that. So many funny, things happening in terms of civil unrest, in terms of crime and vices. Now, we started within my organization, we had a project sponsor, an external project sponsor that felt they wanted to use my place of work there, the company I was working with then, to build a software solution. The product was called Each One Reach One. It's a platform that will allow people who are affluent and have money and wealthy to be able to, make donations online, and then we can now map or should I say link those that need help or foodstuff or money to cater for themselves during that lockdown period. We can map them and then give them those money. So it means you are making a donation and your donation is getting to the ordinary people. And you can choose the location you want your donation to get to. Unlike then that the likes of Tony Elumelu, Dangote were donating to federal government and federal government was embezzling the money, as people said. So you can actually donate to a transparent platform and you will get a notification when your donation has actually touched the life of somebody. And you also get recognition for that. Now, that was what we were building at that point in time when that lockdown set in. We were building the solution. Now, we are running at a very tight schedule. We had several sleepless nights building the solution. We finished building the solution. We have tested it on development, tested it on UAT environment. The aim for us was now to push it to production so that it will be available to the general public like you and I. Now, we finished all our tests on what they call it. We finished all our tests on the Friday, and we say, oh, let us deploy on a Monday. Monday is a very good day to deploy. Let's deploy on a Monday. Now, while we were waiting to deploy on a Monday, the Sunday before the Monday, the President Muhammad Buhari came up and said that as a result of the progress in the fight against COVID-19, blah, 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 they want to release the lockdown restrictions in some states. And Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, we are part of the 3 states that we are listed as those that they are going to be releasing or relieving the lockdown. It means people will be free to go for their daily income jobs, right? And once Buhari made that statement, on Sunday night, the project sponsor called for an emergency project meeting. And what was the long and short of the emergency project meeting? That we are not going to continue the project anymore. That he doesn't see value for the project because the lockdown has been lifted. So the project should be closed. And this is a project who spent rigid and tight deadline delivering. And we are all at the phase of just pushing it online so that people will start using. And all of a sudden, they said we cannot continue with the project because of such and such reasons. So sometimes understanding which stakeholder has the highest decision-making authority helps you to know how to work with your stakeholders and expectations from them. This is an example of a stakeholder analysis table. So we have the name of the stakeholder, the organization they're working with, their role, their interests, their influence, which is in terms of their attitude. What is their interest level? What is their influence level? What is their unique facts? Now, what is their level of authority? What are their expectations and how do you want to manage them, ways to manage them? By the time you're able to pull up this table for the project you'll be working on as a business analyst, and you have this table somewhere, right? That whereby every day you understand, you know who your stakeholders are and what their level of interest and influence is. If there's any conflict between stakeholders, you will know how to approach resolving that conflict. Or if a stakeholder is not being cooperative to your work, you can just come to this stakeholder analysis table and say, oh, this is why this man is not cooperative. Maybe because his attitude is that he wanted me to do this for him, or this is his expectation. Probably his expectation is not being achieved, or we're not meeting his expectation. That is why he's being frustrating, right? So that gives you a better understanding of your stakeholders. Also, we have the stakeholder map that tells us who needs what. For instance, if that stakeholder has a very low interest and a very low influence, we just give minimal contact with that particular stakeholder. An example is an end user. We are building a product for end users to use, right? End users have end users have minimal interest and minimal influence, right? So we just keep in contact with them. But if their interest level is high and their influence is high, is low rather, we keep them informed. Now, if their influence is high and their interest is low, examples are regulators, people like CBN. If you are building a financial product in Nigeria, CBN is not interested about your financial product. If you like, let's say that to make 750 billion or trillion naira for you, they're not interested. But they have a very high influence in the sense that they have regulatory policies and regulatory requirements that you need to meet. And if you don't meet up with those regulatory requirements, they can penalize you, they can ban you, they can fine your business. So you need to ensure you anticipate and meet their needs. But if the interest level of that stakeholder is very high and their influence level is very high, an example is a project sponsor, then you need to manage them thoroughly. You need to work with them thoroughly and closely. So this is what called a stakeholder map that helps you to understand which stakeholder needs what from you. Then the next thing we do when we are trying to plan stakeholder approach, after identifying stakeholders, after performing stakeholder analysis, is to define collaboration between your stakeholders. So you need to understand, in terms of consideration, what is the timing and frequency of collaboration with your stakeholders? Where is the location of your stakeholders? What method of delivery, in terms of communication delivery or collaboration delivery, do your stakeholders prefer? Do they want in-person, physical collaboration or virtual collaboration? You also need to understand the preferences of your stakeholders with respect to communication, with respect to documentation, and all of that. And then the third one is we now identify communications needs for stakeholders, in the sense that we need to know what needs to be communicated, who is the appropriate audience for that communication, when should that communication occur, what will be the level of formality and the level of detail for that particular communication. And then that takes us to the last bit, which is planning, business analysis, governance. Do we have a question with regards to planning stakeholder engagement approach? All right, I'll take that as a no. So please, can you guys give me like 5-7 minutes? I'll be right back. Okay.
All right.
5-7 minutes.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
thanks. You can also use that to have like a water break.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, welcome back. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. How about you, Ahmad? Hope Ahmad is here. Oh, hope he has not gone to chill.
Maybe just give him like a minute.
Yeah, honestly, I can call him.
Okay.
His number is not ringing. Hello, Ahmad. Oh, it's not ringing. It's not ringing. So what do we do now? Hmm. Uh, all right, let's start. Don't know. I don't want us to spend more time. So since it's been recorded, I believe Ahmad can listen to the recording and also catch up. That's the beauty. So planning business analysis governance, which basically is the last part left in the class today, which is the shortest of all today, which talks about governance, authority, decision making. So this helps us to understand how decisions are made about requirements, how decisions are made about designs, how decisions are made about reviews, change controls, approvals, and prioritization of requirements or of our work as a business analyst. To effectively understand governance, we need to determine the process of making decision. So for every organization you work with, one of the intelligence things you need to ask the organization, you need to ask your colleagues or people that you met there is, what is the decision-making process? What is the change control process for the business, for the organization, for the project, for the team, right? In determining the decision-making process, you need to be able to determine participants or identify participants that needs to be part of decision-making discussions. You need to identify or understand who would be in the position to review your work as a business analyst. You also need to know who has your authority to approve your work. So one, if a decision needs to be made, who are those that need to participate in decision-making conversation? Who are those, the person or persons that has the privilege to review your work as a business analyst, and who has the authority to approve your work as a business analyst? These are the three things you need to determine in terms of decision-making process. Number two will be for you to develop a change control process. Change control, how you basically control change within the organization. Number one, in terms of change control processes, is determining the process of requesting for change. So how should change be requested by your client or stakeholders from your team or from your organization or from you as a business analyst. So should it be requested via email? Maybe they send out an email, or should it be, if before you can attend to any change, the change must have a signature from the project sponsor to show that he or she is approving, is aware of the change? Or should the change, can the change come when you just have a meeting? There's a meeting, you jump on a meeting, on a call, and then they tell you the change, you run along with it. So through what process should change be requested? Some people have an ERP system for the organization whereby there's a place for you to log changes, right? When you determine the process of requesting for change, then you determine the elements of the change. So for every change, you tell stakeholders that for every change, we need to understand the cost and timing consideration for the change, the benefits of the change, the risks of the change, the priority of the change, and what actions should the change take with regards to the change, which is the element of the change. Then the third one is for you to determine how change will be communicated. So how will this change be communicated? Is it going to be communicated? Some people communicate, my former place of work, if there's going to be a change, we normally have what we call town hall sessions on Thursday morning. So in that town hall session, the head of people operations, that is the head of HR, or the owner of the business will come in a meeting where everybody is in the organization is present and communicates whatever change that needs to occur. The fourth one will be for you to determine who will perform the impact analysis, who is going to critically look at the change and the impact it's going to have on existing solutions or existing processes. Then determine how the change will be prioritized. Should we execute the change now or leave it as something we'll do in the future? Then you determine who will authorize changes, who has the ability to approve the change, to authorize the change, to give a go-ahead for us to start implementing the change. And you determine how the change will be documented. Is it going to be documented on a Word document or on a Jira ticket, or is it going to be documented on an Excel sheet or in a system? Whichever way you want to document the change, you need to determine how that change will be documented. And then number 3, in terms of governance, is for you to plan prioritization approach. In terms of when we want to prioritize a requirement or prioritize something in this project, what should be the formality of prioritization and what should be the rigor of the prioritization process? In my place of work, we prioritize based on 3 key parameters. Number 1 is compliance. Number 2 is business value. Number 3 is customer or user experience. These are the 3 things we use in our prioritization. So you need to be able to understand for every business or for every organization, what is the formality and what is the rigor of prioritization. You need to know who are the participants, who should you involved in prioritization meetings. If you want to discuss prioritization of requirements or components or anything, who should be involved, who should participate in that meeting? What should be the process for deciding how prioritization would occur, and what criteria should we use for prioritization? Just like I mentioned, the criteria we use in my place of work is compliance, business value, user experience. So you need to determine what are the criteria that we use in our current place, in your place of work. Even where you are working at the moment, you don't need to be a business analyst for you to see this. If you're working in a law firm, you need to understand what are the prioritization criteria for this law firm. So you see that every case or every stuff that come in, we take it, or we prioritize and say, if the case is criminal law, then we take it because we do criminal law. If it is social law, if it is corporate law, there are different ways that the law firm prioritize cases that they will take or assign relevance to cases that they want to take. Then the fourth one is to plan for approvals. The timing and the frequency of approvals are dependent on the size and the complexity of the change, and as well, the associated risks for the foregoing or delaying of an approval. As a business analyst, you must determine the type of requirements and designs to be approved, the timing for the approvals, and the process you need to follow in order to gain approval. When I joined my current place of work, due to the fact that when I joined them last year, April, due to the fact that we have I have my colleagues scattered around the world. Several of my colleagues are in UK, some are in Netherlands, some are in the US, some are in Canada, all around the world. So different time zones and all of that. I was initially at that time working with leveraging on my previous experiences in getting approval for documents. And sometimes I'll end up having documents here to be approved for over 2 months, right? But by the time I was able to understand my stakeholders or the colleagues I'm working with, I can easily get approvals within 2 weeks. And what is the easier way for me to get approvals? All I do is whenever I want to get approval, once I have my documents, I gather all the stakeholders involved. I bring them into a call, into a meeting. We have a workshop, and I walk them through the documentation and then capture their inputs, their opinion. Once I capture their input and opinion, and I say, okay, are you satisfied with all of this? They say yes. Then I go ahead, now amend the documentation based on their input and opinion, have a second review that same week, have a second review with them and run them through all their input and opinion that they've made. And then they say, yes, we are all good. Once I get that, I send it straight to the CEO and he approves. And moreover, the CEO will be part of the workshop as well. So there's no way he will say what he wanted is not in the documentation. So I send it straight to him and then approve. So in less than 2 weeks, I get my documents approved. Unlike before, it would take me a month to 2 months before my documents gets approved. So you need to understand the process you need to follow in order for you to gain approval and who will help in approving the requirements and designs that you are turning out. So that brings us to the end of the session today. I don't know if you have any question regarding to the class of today. Do you have any question?
Yes, I have question.
Yeah.
Could you please explain more about the difference of the first point in prioritization process? You mentioned, if you can go back to that slide.
Oh,
no.
Sorry.
Next one.
Sorry. I've gone down. Mistake.
Okay, no problem.
Give me a minute. I'll be there. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
This formality and rigor of the prioritization process, what's the difference between it and the last one, the criteria to be used? Because you used the same examples.
Yeah. So when I say formality, right, it means in terms of, do we prioritize through informal approach or formal approach? What do I mean? It means when we prioritize things, we need to get a sign off before we say that, before anyone will say, okay, this has been completely formalized and prioritized. So do we need to follow formal approach, formal processes to prioritization? So people tell you that before you can approve, before you, prioritization can be complete, you need to have about 5 meetings. You have a meeting with your team lead, have the meeting with department heads, have meeting with general manager, have meeting with the CEO, then have meeting with the board before they'll prioritize to do that work. So do you follow formal process? That's formality and rigor. Do you understand? But for criteria talks about conditions that we consider or things we put in place when we are prioritizing things. For instance, now if you say, if you say, let us do we have A, B, and C things we need to do, and I say let's do A, you say let's do B, and Michelle say let's do C. 3 of us have opposing opinion, right?
Yeah.
For us to settle the score, we need to say, okay, since we are not having a middle point, let's look at Uptrust. What are the criteria that Uptrust have set for prioritization? So Uptrust says anything that will bring business value should have the highest priority. Would A give us the highest business value, or would B or C give us the highest business value? If so, let's assign a higher priority to A. So that is what we mean by the criteria to be used for prioritization.
Yeah. It's clear now. However, I have another question that does not relate to today's class. It's a general
Okay.
question. I think you said you'll be sharing all the training slides with us every week, as well as the entire session schedule. Am I right?
So what I said was that the recording will be available to you guys every moment we finish the class. But the training slides, we've not discussed about that. Now, how I prefer to approach the training slide is this. I would prefer to share the training slide at the end of the classes. That is entire classes. So you have them as a textbook.
Okay.
Rather than having
Okay.
them as
Okay.
documents for each topic and they're scattered and littered in
Okay.
different places, you might
Yeah.
store
Okay.
them. But if you have it as a
Okay. Okay.
textbook, I've prepared a textbook
Yeah.
for it. Now, if you have a textbook, have it as a textbook, it means you have it, you can refer to it anywhere you
Yeah.
go. Or
That's
if you want to check elicitation, you just scroll through down to elicitation, you see
yeah.
elicitation techniques and how to go about elicitation, all those things to be
That's
available
fine.
for you. But for
That's fine.
the recording is available.
Yeah.
This is a recording of last week. I've also
Yes.
shared your timetable for this
When
cohort.
was that shared?
So I
You
shared
shared
it
that
today.
right?
Yes.
Aha. Okay.
I meant to tell
I'll
you
check
guys
it.
in class
Thank you.
today. So once you go
Okay.
here, check, you see your
Yeah.
timetable. That is the topics you'll be covering and when you'll be covering
Yeah.
those
Thank
topics.
you. Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
All right. All right. I think that brings us to the end of the class for today. I realized Misha was